This is the new 2021 Ford Bronco Sport, and it's the new baby Bronco. The debut of the new Ford Bronco has been big news, but most of the attention has been focused on the larger full-size Bronco, which debuts next year. But today, I'm going to switch things up a little bit and review the new Bronco Sport. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. If you're looking to sell a cool modern enthusiast car from the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. You will get the most views and the most money for your cool car. And if you're looking to buy a cool car from the modern era, Cars and Bids has an amazing selection with daily auctions. Check it out, Cars and Bids at carsandbids.com. So let's talk Bronco Sport, which has kind of gotten lost in all the media hype and excitement around the new Ford Bronco. And that's a shame because the Bronco Sport is pretty cool for what it is. What it is a compact SUV, although really it's closer to subcompact. At 172 inches long, the Bronco Sport is closer in length to the Jeep Renegade and the Honda HR-V than to the larger Ford Escape, even though the Bronco Sport shares the Escape's platform. The Bronco Sport offers 4 trim levels. This is the top of the line model called the Badlands. The other 3 trim levels come standard with a 1.5 liter turbocharged 3-cylinder engine that makes about 180 horsepower. But if you step up to the Badlands, you get a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder that makes 245 horsepower, which is a pretty big number for such a small vehicle. As for pricing, the base model Bronco Sport starts a little over $27,000 with shipping, while this Badlands version starts a little over $33,000 with options. That's a lot more than other tiny SUVs. The Jeep Renegade, for instance, starts around $23,000 with shipping. But the Bronco Sport brings more muscle, more brawn to the compact SUV segment, or so they say. Today, we're going to find out. First, I'm going to take you on a thorough tour of the new Bronco Sport and show you all of the quirks and features of the other Ford Bronco. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug's score. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new Bronco Sport, and this car has an unbelievable number of interesting quirks and cool innovations all throughout, and I'm going to show them all to you. I'm going to start back here with this back window. It just looks like a normal tinted rear window, nothing special, but on the inside you can see there's a little Bronco graphic next to the wiper assembly showing the old school original 70s Ford Bronco. You can't see it from the outside, so why would they do that? Because you're driving the car, you look in your mirror, and you can see that graphic in your back window. And it's just a reminder of the cool car that you're driving every time you look in your mirror. That is a neat little touch. Next up, maybe a more functional touch, is this tailgate, which allows you to open the rear glass independently of the tailgate itself. You can see the controls are down here. One side says glass, the other side says door. And if you push the side that says glass, well then just the glass can open up. And that way, if you have a smaller item you want to put in the back, you don't want to open up the whole thing, you can just open the glass and toss it in. And one cool thing happens when you open the glass. On the inside of the latch for the glass, you can see there's this cool mountain graphic. Again, a nice little Easter egg, just when you open up your rear glass to remind you that you're driving something a little more capable than a regular vehicle. But if you close the rear glass and open up the full tailgate, you gain access to one of my favorite innovations in any new SUV, and that would be this little light on the inside of the tailgate. There's actually 2 of them, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side, and they're put here so they can illuminate this area below the tailgate when the tailgate is up like this. So you're trying to unload luggage or gear at a campsite late at night, you have these lights that can illuminate what you're doing and make it easier to see. And they can be operated with the engine off. You push this little button on the side of the cargo area and these lights turn on. They're completely independent of the vehicle, so you can turn them on even even if you don't turn on the Bronco. And they're even adjustable. You can move them kind of forward or backward depending on where you need light the most. That is a really cool idea. And there are more innovations in this cargo area than just that. For instance, there's a built-in bottle opener. Over on the passenger side, you can see next to the taillight with the tailgate up, this is a bottle opener, very sturdy. So if you're at a campsite or whatever, hanging out, and you can't find your bottle opener in some bag, well, you know there's one built into your Bronco Sport. It's a neat idea. As for the cargo area itself, you can see there's no carpet back here. Instead, this is like a hard plastic rubbery thing. The theory is you can hose it off, so if you stick gear back here that's dirty or muddy or a dog, you can clean it pretty easily. This is not intended to be luxurious. Next up, another item worth pointing out, another Easter egg. When you open up the tailgate, a little light illuminates your cargo area inside, and that light has two bulbs and in the center, a Bronco logo. Because of course it does, just in case you need your interior lighting to remind you of what vehicle you're driving. Another thing I like back here in the cargo area, these hooks on the side, these are very sturdy. A lot of cars have like grocery bag hooks, but these like clip into place and they seem a lot sturdier than usual, so you can put some gear there, whatever, if you don't want it rolling around in the back. Now, one more cargo area item worth noting, it's pretty roomy back here. There's a decent amount of space considering this isn't really that big of a vehicle. You have a pretty big cargo area, and Ford is quick to point out you can put two mountain bikes inside the Bronco Sport, obviously with the rear seats folded down, but it does have the interior space to carry two mountain bikes, so it's pretty big back here and good for your active lifestyle people. But anyway, next we close the tailgate and I want to talk badging. You can see out here the only Ford badge on this entire vehicle is this one in the lower left. That's it. The only place it says Ford. That's because they really want to emphasize that this is a Bronco. They've probably done focus groups who have told them that Bronco has stronger positive feelings than Ford. So one Ford badge, and you can see even back here, Bronco is heavily emphasized in the center with large, white, very clear badging that explains what this is. And it's the same deal up front. You got a nice sturdy, brawny grille and boxy front end, but you don't have a Ford badge. Doesn't say Ford on the hood, on the grille, it just says Bronco, again in big white lettering to make it clear exactly what this is. And the same is true of the wheels. In the middle, the center caps don't say Ford like so many other vehicles. You have the Bronco logo instead. Again, that Ford badge in back, the only Ford badge in this entire Bronco. And by the way, let's talk wheels for a second. Now, like I mentioned, this is the Badlands version, the off-roader Bronco Sport. Priced similarly is the Outer Banks version, which is sort of the luxury Bronco Sport. Now, if you get the Outer Banks, you get 18-inch alloy wheels that are very nice and luxury looking, but if you get the Badlands, you get these. These are only 17-inch wheels, but they just look more purposeful than the Outer Banks 18-inch luxury wheels, and I think this is the coolest wheel option on the Bronco Sport. Now, it's worth noting, if you get the Badlands, you also get all-terrain tires for more capability off-road. You get a 1-inch lift compared to the regular Bronco Sport for a total of about 9 inches of ground clearance, and you get stronger shock absorbers for better capability off-road. You also get a Badlands badge on the front door, just to remind everybody that you chose the off-roader Bronco Sport. Next up, I'm about to get in the Bronco Sport, but before I do that, I want to talk exterior styling. I love it. I love boxy SUVs, and so few of them exist in today's world of aerodynamics and fuel economy regulations, and I think they've done a great job providing a brawny, boxy, bulky design, especially in the compact SUV segment, which has so many boring, swoopy styled lookalikes. This thing certainly stands out. Two interesting touches on the outside. One, you can see the roof line goes up in the middle. That is to provide better headroom for the rear seat passengers, which is often a problem in smaller SUVs like this one, but it won't be a problem in the Bronco Sport since the roof actually raises in height a couple of inches in back. You also have roof racks on here that look pretty beefy, and they're not just intended to support skis or bicycles. Instead, they can support an entire roof tent with a person sleeping inside it. So if you want to go camping on the roof of your Bronco Sport instead of on the ground with all the snakes and bears, you can do that. And next up, we climb into the Bronco Sport, and you can see on the key on the front, it looks like a normal Ford key, but you turn it over and it says Bronco. giving you the street cred of having a Bronco, even though this is technically just the Sport, although it is still very capable. Anyway, you get in here, and the first thing that happens is the infotainment screen in the center plays this graphic, incredibly long. There are like rocks that roll, and then they form the actual Bronco logo, and then it sort of glistens for a while. This is like a 15-second graphic every time you get in the car, and you can't use the infotainment screen until it's done. It has to go through its whole graphic. You have a similar one in the gauge cluster. Again, these rocks roll, and then they reveal this beautiful starry night, and then a shooting star or two go by. It's kind of a cool little movie that plays, and it reminds you of the capabilities of your Bronco Sport. Now, next up, once again, climb inside, and there is not a single Ford logo in this entire car. Like I said, that one on the tailgate's the only one. That includes the interior. On the door sill, it says Bronco, not Ford. The floor mats, Bronco Sport, not Ford. Same deal on the seats. You have the jumping Bronco logo, and even the steering wheel has that same Bronco logo. Not a single Ford thing in here. The Bronco name is apparently just stronger. Plus, people know Bronco is a Ford. That's just how it is. But anyway, next up, moving on to the center console, you can see this dial here, which says GOAT modes on it. G-O-A-T. We know that stands for greatest of all time, but in this vehicle, they've adapted it to mean goes over all terrains. Now, all Broncos have a GOAT mode dial, but most of them just have 5 modes. You have normal, eco, sport, slippery, and sand. But if you get the Badlands version, this one, it adds 2 more modes, which are rock crawl and then mud/ruts. So it has even more modes to cope with even more types of terrain. And when you adjust the GOAT mode dial, you can see in the gauge cluster screen little depictions of each individual mode you're going into to emphasize that you've just made this change and to try to show you what you've now selected. And check this out, it's not just those little images that appear when you adjust the drive modes, the entire background changes once the drive mode change has gone through. Here's what I mean. Right now, this is the normal background when you're in normal mode, but you switch into rock crawl mode, and you can see the little graphic appears, but then it goes away and the entire background of this gauge cluster screen changes to show that you're in rock crawling mode. That is a cool little Easter egg. And by the way, something else notable happens when you switch into rock crawling mode. You can see the infotainment screen switches from showing its normal menu to a camera. That's not the backup camera, that is a front mounted camera. There's a little camera mounted in the grill, you can see it here, and when you're rock crawling, it will display its image onto the screen so you can see precisely where all the rocks are that you can avoid. If you switch back out of rock crawling mode, the camera goes away, but it's a helpful little addition for when you're on the trails. Now, in the vicinity of the GOAT mode dial, you have 4 buttons. 2 are pretty standard. In the lower left, you have traction control off. Nothing unusual there, except I like that the image shows an SUV with a tire on the back. Even though this doesn't actually have the tire on the back, it still gets the point across. It's a capable SUV, not just a regular car. In the upper right, you have the button to lock 4-wheel drive. The other 2 buttons are more interesting. Lower right, that's your differential locker. If you get the Badlands, you get a diff lock, which is a pretty serious off-roading component, even in this lesser Bronco. Now, the most interesting button here is in the upper left. That turns on a feature called trail control, which is sort of like cruise control, except for off-roading trails. You activate that, and it will go over a trail at speeds of up to 20 miles an hour and sort of adjust automatically to the conditions, so you can off-road this thing in cruise control. There's a cruise control for off-roading. That's pretty interesting. Now, also in this vicinity, worth noting, the button above all these, little hand in the circle with the lines on the side, that turns on auto hold. It's a pretty common feature. You get up to a stoplight, you wait for a second, you can take your foot off the brake, and the car will keep the brakes on and the brake lights on, so you don't have to keep your foot on for the duration of the stoplight. Again, a common feature. It's just kind of a weird depiction, but that's what that button is for. Also in the center console, you have Ford's rather unusual new gear lever, which is just a dial. You turn on the car, it's in park, and then you just twist the dial to go into the different gears. And if you want to go into manual mode, you just press the M in the center, and then you're in manual. Now, next up, I've got to say the materials in this interior are bizarre. It is a very strange mix of different materials. For instance, the upper part of the dashboard Sport has this surface, rubbery, looks very durable, like you'd expect from this brawny SUV. Same deal over on the door panel, same surface, again, looks durable, and frankly, it looks kind of cool. Now, in the center console, you have this surface, this sort of gray, which isn't as cool looking, but again, very durable, looks like it could last even if it gets hit with some gear you're moving around, whatever, and that's fine. But then right next to that, you have the center console cover, which is leather, which seems kind of out of place in here. And same deal over on the door panel, you have leather right next to this durable upper door panel material I showed you. I guess this is so you can put your arms in these spots with the leather and it'll feel more comfortable. But then you have some really bad materials. The steering wheel is this like cheap ridged plastic that looks bad and feels pretty bad too. It feels very cheap. Same deal on the cover for the glove box. This ridged plastic just looks cheap, and around the lower part of the dash, around the climate controls, the same thing. So you have this mixture of leather and durability and cheapness, and it's all kind of strange in one car. At the very least, I wish they would upgrade the steering wheel, because that cheap plastic just makes you feel cheap, especially after spending like $35,000. You should get a nicer steering wheel than that. Next up, an interesting Easter egg in this interior is on the side of the front seats, where you have this little storage compartment. It's sort of hidden, but you can stick small items there. You have that on the driver's seat and over on the passenger seat in case you need extra storage in here for something you'll be reaching easily. And speaking of storage, the center control stack in the Bronco Sport has these cool kind of ridged flat surfaces where you can put a phone, and the little ridges will ensure that it won't roll around. That's nice to have when you're off-roading. If you want to put something down and you're going over rocks and it might bump around, at least that'll keep it in place a little bit more. And next up, speaking of the center control stack, at the top you can see the infotainment screen. This is an 8-inch screen, and it comes standard in all Bronco Sport models, not just the higher end trim levels. And it has Ford's latest sync system on it, and I must say it's very good, very responsive. I've reviewed it in other vehicles. It's intuitive, easy to use, just like pretty much all infotainment systems now. It's a relatively small screen, but this is a relatively small car, and frankly I think it works just fine for the size of this vehicle and the size of this interior. Also worth noting, one last item up front, the climate controls are pretty straightforward, but right below them you have the heated seat controls. Yes, this has heated seats, even though they're cloth seats, and you press these buttons and turn them on. The heated seats work very well. They get very warm, so you have heated cloth seats in the Bronco Sport, which is an interesting quirk. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the Bronco Sport. And as you can see, it's pretty tight back here, at least in terms of leg room and knee room. Like I said, this is more subcompact SUV than compact based on its sizing, and that's really true in the back seats. Obviously, you could put the front seat further up, but this is where I would be sitting, and then I can't really sit that easily in the back without my knees just digging into the front seat. It's acceptable, it's roomy enough, but I wouldn't want to use this as like a family vehicle if I had teenagers or if I was carrying around adults in the back with any frequency. But with that said, I do have a lot of headroom back here, again, because I showed you how that roof goes up in the back. You have tons of space, probably 5 inches between my head and the ceiling, so lots of headroom, but not much leg room. It's just sort of reality of a vehicle this size. But anyway, there are quite a few interesting quirks and features in the back seats. Starting on the floor, you lift up the floor mat and you can see this is rubber. I mean real, just not rubberized, but this is like a rubber pliable surface on the floor in this car. This is unique to the Badlands model, and again, the theory is you can kind of hose it out or clean it out easily if you have to, if you get dirty gear or a dog or whatever back here. This is actually also true in the front. There's a rubber surface under the floor mats there too, but it's especially clear in the back just how rubber it is. This is probably the rubberiest surface I've ever seen on the floor of any SUV. And next up, let's talk hidden storage back here, because there are 2 rather interesting compartments. One is under the seat. Check this up. You lift up the seat bottom and there's a little storage compartment back here where you can stick stuff if you never want it to be found, because no one will know to look back here. It's worth noting that's only on the seat on the passenger side. The other part of the rear seat does not have that storage compartment. Only this one seat does. The other interesting storage compartment back here is built into the back of the front seat. You have this little zippered pouch. It's like a built-in backpack on the back of the front seats. You have that driver's side and passenger side, so you can stick stuff back here and then it won't get messed up if you're off-roading. It'll be inside its own little compartment. Now, one drawback I see back here is a lack of charging. You have no USB or USB-C ports for the back seat, but you do have this household style power outlet back here. So I guess you could plug in a power strip and then have all sorts of different chargers if that's what you wanted. It's an interesting decision to go household only and not USB, but that's what they've done in the back of the Bronco Sport. And finally, let's talk folding down the back seats, which is very easy to do. There's no lever in the cargo area, unfortunately, but you want to put them down. There's just a little button next to the headrest. You push it and then fold the seat back down, and then they're down and you have a much larger cargo area. Very simple, very easy to do. No latches or weird levers required. And finally, we move under the hood. And like I said, the Badlands version of the Bronco Sport comes with this 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, about 245 horsepower, which seems like a pretty muscular figure for a vehicle this size. All of the other trims come with a turbo 3-cylinder, about 180 horsepower, which seems like not enough power for a vehicle this size. I'm surprised there's not like a 220 horsepower offering, but I guess we'll see just how powerful this engine is in a minute when I get this out on the road. Now, 2 other items worth noting on this subject. For one, the Bronco Sport can tow up to 2,200 pounds. Not a big number, but it's something. And more importantly, all Bronco Sport models come standard with all-wheel drive. You cannot buy a 2-wheel drive version of the Bronco Sport, at least not yet. So that's one of the reasons why it's priced a little higher than subcompact SUV rivals, because this comes standard with all-wheel drive, and in those vehicles, it's typically an expensive option. But all-wheel drive standard, they really wanted to emphasize the capability of the Bronco Sport. And so those are the quirks and features of the new 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new Bronco Sport. But before I start driving, I want to mention this car gets an enormous amount of attention. I am stunned. Just driving it around, everybody is staring, looking, pointing fingers, taking pictures. You know, I get a lot of these pre-production cars to review, or cars that aren't out yet or about to come out or just came out, and most of the time nobody notices, nobody cares. You know, it's just a car, maybe 1 or 2 people. This thing is a completely different animal. Everybody is excited, everybody is into it. I assume a lot of people think it's the real full-size Bronco, but still the Bronco. They see the badges, they're so pumped, and I can't believe the level of excitement and the level of interest this car has generated, probably more than any other press car that I've ever had. Obviously that'll die down as these start to become more common, and I really do suspect they will become at least relatively common. But anyway, driving experience. One thing I'm kind of surprised by, first thing you notice when you drive around, this car's actually pretty quiet inside. You know, at this price point, you expect some droning from the engine, you expect to hear some road noise, especially the all-terrain tires, but you don't really. This has a nicer drive and ride than a lot of the other competitors, Honda HR-V, Jeep Renegade, that sort of thing. And that surprises me because that's not the intent of this car. This car is supposed to bring like some muscle and some off-roadiness to this segment, but it actually brings a relatively composed car too. And I think that bodes well, because here's your opportunity to get, you know, a brawny, muscular kind of car in this segment, but also it doesn't make compromises for its on-road driving feel. Now, as for the engine power, it does feel a little bit more powerful than I think you would expect given the car's size. 250 horsepower is a big number in a car like this, but it doesn't feel overpowered. When I saw that number in the car's size, I thought, wow, that's a lot of power in this car. Actually, it's fine. Which means that I suspect the turbo 3-cylinder is gonna feel a little bit lethargic. I haven't driven it, I would be interested in doing that, but I think that 180 horsepower is probably not quite enough. It'll be enough to get it to move around, whatever, but you won't be, there's no fun to be had with that little 3-cylinder. It's gonna be just adequate, basically. This powertrain is fine, it's a little fast, but it's not excessive, and this has 60 more horsepower than that one. One interesting thing about driving this car is the driving position actually feels pretty like upright and rugged. You never get that feel in little subcompact SUVs, ever, because they're just too low and too small. But this, you look out over this boxy hood with kind of some bulges in it, and you feel like you're in a really, capable off-roader, which is of course accurate, but you rarely do get that feel in cars like this. And that's kind of a neat thing. If you're looking for a small SUV, but sort of a more boxier, brawnier feel, this is that, and it's kind of the only game in town. The Jeep Renegade I find to be pretty cool, but it definitely definitely doesn't feel brawny. It just seems kind of neat and interesting. I think Ford is betting big on the fact that there are people who want small SUVs who don't want a RAV4 or a Rogue. They're boring, they're swoopy style. There are people who want vehicles like this that are smaller and cheaper, but also rugged, and this is it right now. Handling feels about normal for an SUV like this. Really, I'm just taken by the ride quality. This is an impressive vehicle in that sense. It drives well, and of course we know that it's surely capable off-road, 9 inches of ground clearance, all these modes. I'm impressed by sort of the overall package they've put together here. Now, it is more expensive than its rivals, like I mentioned. They're more on-road focused. They don't have some of this stuff that add to the cost, like standard all-wheel drive and the drive modes. But I don't know, if you're looking to get away from the break the mold of the Honda HR-Vs, the Mazda CX-3s, this is a very, very compelling vehicle, and you get to have the cool new Bronco aspect and all these innovative like quirks that I've shown you. There's some cool stuff here. This is an impressive car, and I suspect these will be very popular, and with good reason. And so that's the 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. Now, I know this isn't the real thing, the one everyone's been waiting for, the full-size Bronco, but if you're looking for a compact SUV and you're tired of all the boring little crossovers that all look so similar, the Bronco Sport is an excellent alternative. And now it's time to give the Bronco Sport a Doug's score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Bronco Sport looks good. I like the boxy lines. It's nice for an SUV, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in the low 6-second range, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Handling is normal for the segment, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Fun factor is higher than any other vehicle like this, not because it's fun to drive, but because it's so capable off-road. It's no Jeep Wrangler or probably full-size Bronco, but it still earns a 4 out of 10. Cool factor is huge right now. I suspect this will drop as these become common, but the level of interest in this car is absolutely nuts for a small SUV, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 22 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The Bronco Sport is very nicely equipped, not perfect of course, but excellent for this segment, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Comfort is normal for a car like this, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Quality is fine, materials are okay, not fantastic, about normal for a car at this price point, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Practicality is normal for a car this size, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Finally, value. This is expensive for an SUV this size, but it offers more than other compact SUVs, more innovation, more capability, and a much cooler name, Bronco, instead of RAV4 or Nissan Rogue. It gets a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 33 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 55 out of 100, which places it here against relevant vehicles. I'm not surprised it beats out the Ford Escape, Mazda CX-30, etc., but I am surprised it beats out the Toyota 4Runner, though just barely. Part of that is the Bronco Sport's cool factor score, which will decrease in time, but the Bronco Sport is also faster than the 4Runner with much better tech and a far lower price of entry. Overall, the Bronco Sport is a surprisingly compelling vehicle.